Chapter 5. Christianity encourages compassion. Racism suppresses empathy. Christianity encourages compassion. Of all the psychological forces that combat racism, empathy may be one of the most powerful. Empathy is the ability to step outside of your own experience and enter, however imperfectly, into the experience of another person. It is the capacity to ask, what might it feel like to be them? When empathy is active, prejudice becomes much harder to maintain. When empathy is absent, prejudice becomes much easier to justify. This is why racism and empathy are often psychological opposites. The more deeply we see and feel another person's humanity, the harder it becomes to hate them. The more we reduce them to a stereotype, category, or label, the easier hatred becomes. Human beings have a natural tendency to feel empathy most strongly toward people they perceive as similar to themselves. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as empathic bias. Without conscious effort, people often feel more emotional concern for their family, their friends, their community, their tribe, people who resemble them. This tendency isn't necessarily malicious, it's part of human nature. The problem arises when empathy becomes restricted to only those within our circle. Racism narrows the circle of compassion. Instead of seeing another person's pain as meaningful, people begin seeing it as distant, irrelevant, or deserved. Most prejudice survives through emotional distance. Consider this question: which creates a stronger emotional response? Hearing that 1,000 strangers suffered, watching one identifiable person suffer. Most people respond more strongly to the individual. Why? Because empathy is activated by connection. The more distant people feel from another group, the easier it becomes to ignore their struggles. The less we know about someone's life, the easier it is to reduce them to a stereotype. Distance weakens empathy. The relationship strengthens it. Stereotypes simplify human beings. The brain likes shortcuts because shortcuts save mental energy. Instead of learning about individuals, stereotypes allow people to place entire groups into convenient categories. The danger is that stereotypes replace stories. Instead of seeing a father worried about his children, a mother struggling to make ends meet, a student pursuing a dream, a worker trying to support a family, people see only a label. Labels suppress empathy because they erase individuality. Compassion grows when people become people again. One of the strongest psychological tools for reducing prejudice is perspective taking. Perspective taking means intentionally imagining life from another person's viewpoint. Questions such as, what challenges might they face? What fears do they carry? What experiences shaped them? What losses have they endured? Research has consistently shown that perspective taking tends to reduce prejudice because it activates empathy. When people imagine another person's experience, the brain begins treating them less like an outsider and more like a fellow human being. This doesn't mean agreement, it means understanding. And understanding often weakens hostility. One remarkable aspect of Jesus' life is his repeated attention to people whom society overlooked. He consistently noticed the poor, the sick, the rejected, the outsider, the socially marginalized. Psychologically, this is significant because compassion begins with attention. You cannot empathize with suffering you refuse to see. Jesus repeatedly directed people's attention toward those whom others ignored. Where society saw categories, he saw people. Where society saw problems, he saw human beings. Where society saw outsiders, he saw neighbors. This mindset directly challenges the psychological mechanisms that allow prejudice to survive. Compassion broadens our circle of concern. A compassionate person increasingly thinks their suffering matters too. This sounds simple, but it is transformative. Racism asks, why should I care about them? Compassion asks, how can I not care? Racism emotionally separates. Compassion emotionally connects. Racism shrinks the heart. Compassion enlarges it. Imagine a woman named Rebecca. Rebecca grew up in a comfortable suburban community. Her family is generally kind and respectable. Yet throughout her childhood, she hears subtle assumptions about a particular racial group. The comments are rarely hostile. More often they sound like, "Those neighborhoods are dangerous. People like that don't value education. They make bad choices." Rebecca never questions these assumptions. They simply become part of the background of her thinking. The important detail is that she has very little direct contact with anyone from that group. Her opinions are formed from distance rather than relationship. As Rebecca becomes an adult, she remains largely surrounded by people who share her background. Her beliefs go unchallenged because she rarely encounters evidence that contradicts them. The members of the other group remain largely abstract. Statistics, news stories, political discussions, labels, not people. And when people remain abstract, empathy remains weak. Rebecca works as a nurse. One year she accepts a temporary position at a hospital serving a diverse urban community. Initially, she feels uncomfortable. She worries she won't fit in. She quietly carries many of her assumptions with her. Then she meets a patient named Angela. Angela belongs to the very racial group Rebecca has long stereotyped. Angela is a single mother undergoing treatment for a serious illness. Over several weeks, Rebecca gets to know her. Angela talks about her life. Rebecca learns that Angela works 2 jobs, raising 2 children alone, cares for an aging grandmother, barely sleeps, constantly worries about paying bills. One evening, Angela begins crying. She tells Rebecca her greatest fear is not dying. Her greatest fear is leaving her children without a mother. Rebecca feels something shift inside her. The fears Angela describes are the same fears Rebecca would have. The love Angela has for her children mirrors Rebecca's own love for her family. For the first time, the stereotype dissolves. A human story replaces it. Over the following months, Rebecca meets many other patients from similar backgrounds. She hears stories of sacrifice, courage, hardship, and resilience, love. Many of the assumptions she carried begin to collapse, not because someone argued with her, not because someone shamed her, but because she finally encountered real people. Psychologically, empathy is doing its work. The more she understands their experiences, the harder it becomes to reduce them to simplistic stereotypes. Around this same period, Rebecca becomes deeply engaged in studying the life of Jesus. One theme stands out repeatedly. Jesus notices people others overlook. He stops for them, speaks with them, listens to them, values them. Rebecca begins asking herself, if Jesus consistently moved toward marginalized people, why have I spent so much of my life keeping emotional distance from them? The question lingers. She realizes that many of her assumptions survived because she never took the time to truly know people. Years later, Rebecca reflects on the change. She realizes her prejudice was not primarily rooted in hatred. It was rooted in absence of relationship, absence of understanding, absence of empathy. The people she once stereotyped had always been fully human. What changed was her ability to see them. As compassion grew, prejudice lost its foundation because it became impossible to maintain simplistic assumptions about people whose stories she now knew. Psychologically, racism often survives when people remain emotionally disconnected from the experiences of others. Distance allows stereotypes to flourish. Empathy challenges them. Christianity amplifies this challenge through compassion. Jesus' example consistently pushes people towards those they might otherwise ignore, fear, or dismiss. The psychological question is, can I imagine what life is like for them? The Christian question goes even further. Can I love them as my neighbor? Empathy begins by understanding another person's pain. Compassion moves one step further and says, your pain matters to me. And once a person's suffering genuinely matters to us, it becomes extraordinarily difficult to treat them as less valuable, less worthy, or less human.